So imagine hitting retweet, right? Just to share a political cartoon with a few dozen completely inactive followers.
Yeah, barely anyone even seeing it.
Exactly. But now imagine the police violently raiding your home, taking all your electronics, and a judge actually sending you to prison for nearly 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah, just because that single click supposedly caused, quote, severe public order chaos across an entire nation.
I mean, it sounds like the premise of some dystopian novel, honestly.
It really does.
But it's the literal reality of the case we are digging into today.
It is. And to unpack it, we've got a deeply unusual stack of sources for this deep dive. I mean, we are looking at original Chinese legal documents, an appeal file, and a literal blood letter written from prison.
Right by the defendant.
Yeah, a scientist named Dr. Chen Jingwan. But here is the really fascinating twist for you, the listener. To understand the mechanics of this conviction, we are actually relying on a series of detailed legal analyses generated by multiple artificial intelligence models.
Like ChatGPT and Copilot.
Exactly. DeepSeek, Gemini, Grok. These models essentially acted as a panel of expert counsel, evaluating the scientific and philosophical validity of the court's decision.
Which is just a completely novel approach. I mean, we are watching advanced AI dissect the logic of a human legal system.
Yeah.
And instead of using, like, legal precedent, the AIs are using the laws of physics, network mathematics, and just core principles of philosophy as their primary tools.
It's wild, but before we jump into how these AI models pick this case apart, I want to set a visual for you, the listener. In a standard criminal case, like a physical assault, cause and effect is usually pretty obvious, right?
A punch is thrown, a bone breaks.
Yeah, and the jury literally sees the jagged white line on an X-ray. It's cause and effect. But how do you prove cause and effect on the internet?
That's the big question.
Like if I tweet something, and a week later there is societal unrest, how do you mathematically prove my tweet was the spark?
Well, that is the exact question Dr. Chen's case forces us to ask. And to give you the necessary factual background from our sources, Dr. Chen Jingyuan is a highly educated man.
Right.
He holds a PhD and is a scientist specializing in nonlinear complex systems. And between 2019 and 2022, he used a VPN to bypass the firewall in China to access Twitter.
Okay.
And once there, he retweeted various posts, things like updates from the U.S. Embassy, political cartoons.
Including that famous Hong Kong umbrella girl image, right?
Exactly, yeah, and various academic articles.
But I think we really need to emphasize his reach here because he was the furthest thing from an influencer.
Oh, totally.
He had fewer than 100 followers. And the sources note that the vast majority of them were inactive, essentially just zombie accounts.
Barely anyone saw his activity. I mean, it was practically a void. Yet the official charge that led to his prison sentence was picking quarrels and provoking trouble.
Right.
The court claimed his retweets directly caused severe public order chaos.
And it's probably worth pausing here just to, frame our perspective for you. The sources we're exploring today contain highly politically sensitive content regarding the Chinese legal system, the government, and specific political figures.
We definitely need to be clear on that.
Yeah. So our goal today isn't to take a political stance on any of these entities. We aren't endorsing the viewpoints of the original documents or the AI models or the court itself for that matter.
Right. We are here strictly to look at the mechanics of the arguments.
Exactly. Impartially unpacking it. We want to understand how these AIs use science and philosophy to test the court's logic.
And that analytical approach is exactly where the AI models start. Because when ChatGPT and Grok parsed the court verdict, they didn't, get bogged down in the political emotion of the case.
Which a human lawyer might do.
Exactly. They immediately stripped it down to a foundational question of causality.
The core philosophy.
Right. The court stated that retweet A caused chaos B. So to test that, the AI has brought in an 18th century Scottish philosopher named David Hume.
Hume. Okay, let's unpack this. Because Hume is the guy who basically ruined causality for everyone, right?
He kind of did, yeah.
Like, he argued that humans don't actually see cause and effect.
He did. So Hume is famous for his regularity theory. He pointed out that we never actually witness the invisible force of causation. What we actually see is something he called constant conjunction.
Meaning event A happens and then event B happens right after, over and over again.
Yeah, think of his classic billiard balls analogy.
Okay.
You're standing over a pool table. You see the white cue ball roll across the felt and strike the red ball.
Right.
The red ball then shoots into the corner pocket. Well, Hume argued that your eyes didn't actually see force transferring from one ball to the other.
You just saw them touch.
Exactly. You merely saw spatial proximity, the balls touching, and temporal succession, one hit, then the other moved. But because you've seen this sequence happen a million times in your life, your mind forms a psychological habit.
So you just expect the red goal to move.
Right. That habit is what we lazily call cause and effect. True causality, according to Hume, requires a repeated, observable, empirical rule.
Wow. So if we apply Hume's billiard balls to Dr. Chen's Twitter account, ChatGPT is basically saying there is zero empirical rule here.
None at all.
I mean, we don't have a million instances showing that a micro account with zombie followers retweeting a cartoon reliably leads to the collapse of public order.
Right, because millions of people retweet political content every single day.
Yeah, and society doesn't constantly collapse in conjunction with it.
Exactly. The AI analysis points out that the court is substituting psychological fear for empirical fact.
Mm.
Without that constant conjunction, the court is committing a massive inductive fallacy.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate for a second, though.
Go for it.
Because just because something is incredibly rare doesn't mean it didn't cause the outcome this one specific time, right?
Okay, I see where you're going.
Let's step away from pool tables and think about like a forest fire. If I drop a lit match in a forest, the forest doesn't always burn down. Most of the time it hits the dirt and goes out, but if it does burn down this one time, my match still caused it.
That is a very robust challenge. And actually, it's why the AI models don't just rely on Hume.
Oh, they have a backup.
Yeah, in its analysis, the Grok model brought in a more contemporary philosophical framework, which is David Lewis's counterfactual theory.
Counterfactual theory.
Right. In legal terms, this is often called the but-for test.
Mhm.
Lewis argued that event A is the cause of event B if, and only if, without A, B would not have happened.
Okay, so you have to run a mental simulation.
Yes, you imagine a counterfactual universe where event A simply never existed.
Right, so let's run that simulation with my example. We imagine a world where I walk through the forest, but I never drop that match.
And if you never drop the match, the forest remains perfectly intact.
Right.
Therefore, dropping the match is a necessary condition for the fire. It is the cause.
Makes sense.
But what's compelling is how Grok applies this test to Dr. Chen. The AI asks us to imagine a counterfactual world where Dr. Chen never installed a VPN, never logged onto Twitter, and never retweeted those specific posts.
Okay.
Would the macro-level state of China's public order have been any different?
I mean, when you frame it like that, the answer feels immediately obvious.
Right.
The internet is a sea of a billion users. Removing his handful of retweets wouldn't even register as a ripple.
Exactly. The sources argue forcefully that the absence of Dr. Chen's retweets would change absolutely nothing. If public order chaos truly existed, it would have existed entirely regardless of his actions.
Wow.
Yeah, under the counterfactual theory, his retweets were not a necessary condition, which means they logically cannot be the cause.
That is a pretty airtight philosophical takedown, but philosophy is still in the realm of, abstract logic.
True.
And Dr. Chen is a scientist. I mean, he literally studies nonlinear complex systems for a living. So here's where it gets really interesting. How does hard science look at this legal charge? Like, how did the AIs use actual physics to evaluate this?
Well, this is where the Gemini and Copilot analyses really shine. They break the internet down into the actual physics of complex networks,
Okay.
analyzing the spread of information on 3 distinct scales: the micro, the meso, and the macro.
Okay, let's start at the bottom, the micro level. What are the actual physics of a single retweet?
So at the micro level, the spread of information isn't magic, right? It's modeled mathematically using something called the Galton-Watson branching process.
Malcolm Watson.
Yeah. Imagine a tree branching out from a single trunk. The math relies on a variable called the average branching number, usually represented by the Greek letter mu.
Moo, okay.
This number represents how many people, on average, will share your post after seeing it.
Right, so if I post a video and on average 2 of my friends share it, my branching number is 2.
Correct.
And because 2 is greater than 1, the information grows exponentially. Like, that is the literal definition of going viral.
Exactly. But the mathematical inverse is equally true.
What do you mean?
Well, if that branching number is less than 1, say, only 0.1 people share it, the math dictates that the spread enters what is called a subcritical zone.
Subcritical?
Right. And when that happens, the mathematical theorem of extinction guarantees that the cascade will die out.
Wow. So it's the mathematical equivalent of throwing a party and just nobody showing up.
Worse.
Yeah.
It's like laws of physics stepping in to actively prevent anyone from knocking on your door.
Ouch.
Yeah. Because Dr. Chen had practically zero active followers, his branching number was a tiny fraction of 1. Gemini's analysis points out that his information cascade died instantly.
It just
It
evaporated.
was mathematically, physically guaranteed to go extinct the exact moment he hit retweet.
That is wild. So mathematically, his specific tweet hits a dead end. But what if the danger isn't the tweet itself, but the shape of the network it's traveling through?
Yeah.
Like, how does the overall architecture of a platform like Twitter factor into this?
That'd be the meso level, right?
Exactly. To understand the meso level, the AI copilot referred to Cohen's percolation threshold. Okay, big term. Break that down.
It deals with the structural reality of scale-free networks. And social media is a prime example of a scale-free network.
Okay.
It has massive central hubs, celebrities, politicians, or major news outlets with tens of millions of followers.
The big players.
Right. But surrounding those hubs are billions of tiny long-tail edge nodes, users with barely any reach. Dr. Chen was firmly an edge node.
So if the hub is a massive 10-lane superhighway, an edge node is like a tiny dirt dead-end street.
That is a perfect analogy. Cohen's mathematical threshold proves that a scale-free network is incredibly robust against whatever happens on those dirt dead-end streets.
So it just doesn't matter what happens there.
Basically, you could randomly activate or entirely delete millions of edge nodes, and the overall geometry of the superhighways wouldn't change at all.
Wow.
Structurally, it is physically impossible for an isolated edge node like Dr. Chen to somehow bypass the network's geometry and flood the whole system. The digital pipes simply do not exist to carry a tiny drop of water to the entire ocean.
Wait, I have to challenge this, though, with a concept that gets thrown around a lot in pop science.
Okay.
What about the butterfly effect?
Right.
We've all heard the chaos theory idea that a butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil can set off a tornado in Texas.
Yeah.
Couldn't his one tiny retweet be that butterfly flap? Like the final imperceptible straw that breaks the camel's back?
It is a really seductive metaphor, and the prosecution implicitly relies on that exact kind of thinking. But the DeepSeek AI model calmly dismantles this using macro-level systems physics.
Really? How?
Because the butterfly effect, technically known as sensitive dependence on initial conditions, it doesn't just happen anywhere at any time.
It doesn't.
No, it only applies if a system is already in a supercritical state.
Oh, meaning the system has to be hovering right on the jagged edge of total chaos already. Like the camel's back has to be fracturing under the weight of 1,000,000 tons before that final straw actually matters?
Precisely. And the AI points out a glaring hole in the legal case. The prosecution provided absolutely zero evidence that the Chinese social network was hovering at this critical load.
They just assumed it.
Right. You can't just invoke the butterfly effect as a magic legal spell without empirically proving the system was primed for it.
Makes sense.
Furthermore, DeepSeek brings in a foundational rule from computer science called the CAP theorem.
The CAP theorem, what does that stand for and how does it relate to human social networks?
Well, CAP stands for consistency, availability, and partition tolerance.
Okay.
The theorem states that in any massive distributed system, you can only guarantee 2 of those 3 things at the exact same time.
Only 2.
Yeah. Consistency means every user sees the exact same information at the exact same moment. Availability means the system is always online and ready to accept inputs. And partition tolerance means the system keeps functioning even if some communication between nodes drops.
So if a network like Twitter wants to be always available and survive dropped connections, it has to sacrifice perfect consistency.
Yes. And that sacrifice means there is intrinsic disorder built into the system. Millions of people are seeing different things at different times.
Right.
A complex network will always have background noise, fluctuations, and minor localized chaos. It is a physical feature of the architecture, not a bug.
Man, so if the authorities observed any, quote, chaos online, it wasn't caused by Dr. Chen's retweet.
No.
It was just the natural mathematical background noise of 1 billion people existing online simultaneously.
Exactly. Blaming him for network chaos is like, and I love this analogy from the text, it's like blaming a single pedestrian crossing the street for a citywide traffic gridlock.
I love that. Or claiming a single breath of air alters the Earth's entire atmosphere.
Right. So when you synthesize all of this, the AI analyses conclude that the court committed what they call a micro-macro attribution fallacy.
Micro-macro attribution fallacy.
Yeah. The court took a macro-level, system-wide structural phenomenon and pinned it on a mathematically irrelevant micronode. In the realm of physics, it's not that the causal chain has weak links. It's that the chain simply doesn't exist.
Which brings us to, honestly, the most baffling, frustrating part of this entire deep dive.
Yeah.
If David Hume and the counterfactual tests prove it is logically impossible that he caused the chaos,
Right.
and if branching math and network percolation prove it is physically impossible, how on earth did a judge justify sending him to a prison cell for nearly 2 years?
Yeah.
Like, what was the actual legal logic written in the verdict?
This is where we see a severe collision between legal reality and scientific logic. Because according to the original court documents, the judge essentially skipped the need for physical evidence of a causal chain.
They just skipped it.
Yeah. Because the prosecution couldn't scientifically prove his retweet caused anything, the court relied on what the sources describe as a guilt by identity presumption.
Guilt by identity. Walk me through how a court actually writes that down.
The judge's logic, which is documented in the verdict, focused heavily on Dr. Chen's background. The reasoning was that because Dr. Chen is a highly educated man with a PhD, he possesses a superior level of intelligence.
Okay.
Therefore, he, quote-unquote, should have known right from wrong in the eyes of the state. And because he should have known, the court presumed he knowingly spread false information with the specific intent to insult the national leadership and provoke trouble.
Wow. The irony there is just staggering.
Oh, it really is.
I mean, in his appeal and that literal blood letter he wrote from prison, Dr. Chen points this out. The court weaponized his high intelligence to secure a conviction.
Yeah.
They essentially said, you have a PhD, so you must be guilty. But when he tried to actually use that PhD, bringing in his deep expertise in complex systems to defend himself,
They refused to hear it.
they silenced the very science they used to build his profile. That's insane.
It is a profound contradiction. The AI legal analyses, particularly ChatGPT, label this a teleological fallacy.
Teleological fallacy.
Yeah. Teleology is a philosophical concept where you explain phenomena by the purpose they serve rather than by their actual causes.
Oh, I see.
In this context, it means the court started with an end goal, the political desire to secure a conviction against Dr. Chen, and they simply worked backward.
They needed him to be guilty, so they reverse-engineered the logic to arrive at that destination.
Exactly. They needed a cause and an effect to justify putting him in prison, so they invented them, using his educational identity as a substitute for empirical evidence.
But wait, what about the law itself? Doesn't the Chinese Constitution have safeguards against this kind of arbitrary conviction?
It absolutely does, and the sources spend considerable time on this. Article 35 of the Chinese Constitution explicitly guarantees freedom of speech to its citizens.
Right.
And the defense points out the actual nature of what Dr. Chen was sharing. We are talking about political cartoons, subjective emotional expressions, and theoretical political debates, like speeches by Donald Trump regarding communism.
Things that are, by their very nature, completely subjective. I mean, you cannot scientifically debunk a cartoon. You can't put a drawing of a girl holding an umbrella under a microscope and prove it is a false rumor.
And that is the crux of the constitutional argument. The defense, which is heavily supported by the AI analyses, argues that criminalizing the sharing of art, emotional expression, and theoretical debate as, spreading rumors, it fundamentally misunderstands human civilization and the law.
Because a theoretical debate is an exchange of ideas.
Right. It is not a broadcast of objective fake news that can cause physical harm. By treating subjective speech as objective falsehoods that somehow generate physical chaos, the court's logic breaks down not just on a scientific level, but on a constitutional one.
So what does this all mean? We've traveled from the 18th century billiard tables of David Hume through the complex branching math of the Galton-Watson process, all the way into constitutional law and the capabilities of modern AI.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has. For you, the listener, the sources we've explored today present this case as a stark, glaring warning. It shows us exactly what happens when 19th century mechanical legal thinking, this very linear A causes B mentality, attempts to govern a 21st century complex digital network.
It just doesn't fit. The sources argue convincingly that without the strict requirement of actual empirical evidence of cause and effect, the law stops being a shield designed to protect citizens.
It becomes a weapon.
Exactly. It transforms into a magic wand for authorities, a tool they can simply wave to declare that a single retweet caused an avalanche, even when the laws of physics scream that it is physically impossible.
It brings us right back to the beginning, to that X-ray metaphor. We desperately want the law to be precise. We want cause and effect to be visible, undeniable, like a jagged white line on a broken bone.
Yeah.
But in the digital age, a single retweet isn't a hammer breaking a bone. It is a single breath in a hurricane. And if the courts decide your breath caused the storm, well, suddenly the diagnostic landscape isn't just murky, it is terrifying.
It really is. And this leaves us with a provocative thought, one that extends far beyond Dr. Chen's cell. As we all live our lives increasingly inside these massive, hyper-connected digital networks, we are all constantly contributing to the daily noise.
Yeah, we are.
Every single one of us is an edge node. We share, we like, we retweet. If our legal systems stubbornly refuse to understand the mathematics of complex systems, if courts can simply ignore the physics of how information actually spreads, how long until any of us could be legally blamed for an avalanche? We had absolutely no power to start.
It's a question that isn't going away anytime soon. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.